Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to have a loud voice. Welcome to the Institute of Advanced Studies. I'm Professor Ksenia Schmutz, and I'm Director of the LIAS. And it's really wonderful to see so many of you here today. As always, here at the International House, we gather to discuss the most exciting things, the most challenging things, to have conversations that perhaps we wouldn't have anywhere on campus. So, and I'm particularly delighted today to welcome back yet again one of our favorite fellows. We're not supposed to have favorites, but one of our wonderful fellows, Yolandi. Thank you so much for coming back again to the LIAS. And it's just really wonderful to see all the work and all the legacy that you've been producing over the years. So really, really great. Yolandi is here with us as a Loughborough-Leicester Fellow. This year we have started hosting fellowships together with our neighbors at University of Leicester and their IAS. And it's really great to see this regional collaboration growing. This regional collaboration is important for us. It's been through all the work Yolandi has been doing with Rob Harland and Mike Wilson, of course, and many other colleagues. So it's great to see this kind of really manifesting into something bigger and even more exciting. In the next hour, we'll hear from Yolandi. Rob will introduce her. A couple of housekeeping rules. The presentation is recorded and will be on our YouTube channel and released as a podcast, but we are not recording Q&A. So any comments, questions, feel free to ask them. Those will not be released as a part of the recording. For those of you joining us online, please post your comments in the comments section. We will be reading them. And then, of course, for those of you in the room, you will also have an opportunity to talk to Yolandi and her hosts over the lunch that will be served in the reading room after the presentation. Yolandi, welcome back. Rob, would you like to introduce you?
I'd certainly like to introduce Yolandi. Like Franklin, who said, how long does it take to cut down a tree? And the response was, well, it takes you 5 years to sharpen an axe, and then it takes you a minute to cut it down. I kind of feel a bit like that with Yolandi, because we've been sharpening our axe for about 5 years now, haven't we, collaborating. And even just last night, we were at the SDG-11 hub at Democracy University, really doing what Ksenia was just saying, really, linking up these sort of dots between the IAS here, the Leicester Institute of Advanced Studies, and we were also bringing together the work that was done at the SDG-11, which is the global hub, and we were also talking about the UNESCO chair in storytelling education for sustainability. So several things linking together, not least Yolandi returning to us in her capacity as a research fellow at the GCRO, which I think is about a year old now, that role, and it's really a fascinating development from our work over the last 3 or 4 years, working with the Nelson Mandela Foundation. So I'm really delighted that we, well, first of all, thanks to the IAS for supporting this financial point of view, but I'm also really delighted that we're going to hear a little bit of a new inflection, should I say, on the work that Yolandi's been doing and taking some of our ideas out to GCRO, which I'm sure she'll explain who that is. So I'm really looking forward to this talk. So yeah, over to you, Yolandi.
Thank you, Rob. So morning, everybody, and thank you so much for all the familiar faces that was able to join. And it's also really lovely to meet new people as well today. So like Rob and Ksenia said, I'm Yolandi. I come from South Africa. I live in Pretoria, and this is my 3rd year back at the AIS, but for different reasons. Last year, so the first year it was in the initial phases of our project where we started to explore naming after Nelson Mandela. And last year, we were here with Town Observatory funding to have a panel discussion with Mike when he was awarded his chair, to open up the dialogue of how storytelling now becomes part of this entire research agenda, together with the GCRO and the Town Observatory and the function of global urban observatories, storytelling and graphic heritage. So how everything intertwines. And I hope I do this presentation justice today and the work that we have been doing. So I'm a postdoctoral research fellow at the moment of the Gauteng City-Region, but at the University of Johannesburg, in the Faculty of Architecture, Design and Arts. And specifically, I'm hosted by the graphic design department, which is a beautiful combination with our school's graphic design department, or with Loughborough School's department. So I decided to start today with just to tell you, I think I want to use the word magnitude of this project and this research or this exploration. It's not something that happens overnight. And with an impact agenda, we know that impact isn't immediately. It comes afterwards, and it's hard work to keep the relationships alive when the funding is not there. It's great when we have funding, but there isn't always funding. And it's harder work to keep those relationships alive. So we started in 2021 in COVID time, just through our observation of the Nelson Mandela Park in Leicester. We had a look at the park, and my husband was with me. He's in the audience today, Everard. He's presenting tomorrow. And we had a look from a South African perspective, and we were asking, why is this park in the middle of Leicester named after Mandela? Why? And just through the research and the documentation around the renaming of the park, it wasn't evident the exact reason. We had some speculations and some ideas. We reached out to the Nelson Mandela Foundation. That's where the conversation started, to say, can you tell us more about this park? Since the park in Leicester is community orientated, we decided to have a look at a community park in South Africa, and that was in Mamelodi. And we commissioned a local photographer to go into that space and record that park for us so that we could compare apples with apples. So community park with a community park. After that, after we saw, I'll show you some photos a little bit later on. After we did that first space in South Africa, we received some funding that allowed us to document 5 additional places. So in total, 6 places in the Gauteng province of South Africa. So here you can see the funding that came in. Afterwards, we received funding again, but not to do research, but to take our research into an impact agenda. And there we specifically work with the Nelson Mandela Foundation to hear what are their needs, not what we want to do with our research, but what can our research do for the organization? What are their needs, and how we can make the best of this initiative. After that, we got a small amount of funding from the schools. We asked again for money, and we got a little bit of funding from the School of Design and Creative Arts to do a small extension on the project to actually work with the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital, which was sort of like a passion project for me. I saw this space. We didn't include it originally in the project just because of ethical reasons. And when they saw the exhibition, their question was, why didn't you include us? We really want to be part of this. And I mean, Loughborough's generosity is just so amazing. If there's really scope and a really valuable contribution that can be made, there's always funding available. You just need to ask. And we did the project with the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital. And through that, we embarked with the computer science department with Sarah and Ferrat, and to work on an AI angle also. So to make our research not just accessible to the public, but actually to disseminate it at a level to the children of the hospital too. So while we were busy with this, the town observatory started in Loughborough through the Impact Hub, and we asked for money for SeedCon project. We were not successful, but they said, you know what, there's definitely potential to do a knowledge exchange between the town observatory and the Gauteng City-Region Observatory. So where the locations is. And through the knowledge exchange, they approached me to say, Yolandi, you know what? We have this postdoctoral position. Would you be interested in doing it? So, and that's how I ended up at the Gauteng City-Region as their postdoc, working on urban places as narrative spaces. That leads beautifully into Mike's chair. And as you can see on your right-hand side, just the amount of institutions, universities, funding associations, companies involved in actually doing this. So this is 5 years work. So just to give you an overview of how far have we come. Now, you can't do it alone. If you ever thought you could do it alone. So we have this saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village to get a project of this magnitude and to keep it going. So these are just some of the people. I didn't have time to incorporate everybody, but this is some of the people, and some of them are in the audience today. So our initial conversation about this was between Alison, Rob, and myself over a cup of virtual coffee in COVID time. And Mirella was part of the team. She's now back in Brazil. Here we have the Nelson Mandela Foundation team. Razia Sandili, which was also a fellow here about 2 years ago, and Anne, who's the exhibition coordinator. We have Mike, and I'm also part of the Storytelling Academy. So to see how everything fits together, I think often everybody just see like a sliver of it. We have Sarah and Farad at the Computer Science Department that worked with us with the AI. We have Everard, which is also the host of the local university, Swan University of Technology. We had Inke, he is a entrepreneur, but he also he specializes in stakeholder engagement. So we used someone to help us with stakeholder negotiations and to give a neutral ground. And then we had the exhibition team and the photographers at the top. So Celeste was our main photographer. This is Fidel, who did the Mamelodi photos, and that is Alette, that went into the spaces like the theatre, Mandela Village, and the bridge. Okay, so this is where everything started. So if you forgot about COVID, I wanted to remind you of COVID today, because that's actually where it started. So it was January 2021. This is Leicester Park, and this was a sign in Leicester Park. And what was interesting about this time is this park was really used quite a bit by the community, because you may gather outside within certain limitations. And I think often a park is just a park, or it's a place where you walk through, but how do people use a space? And then if it's named after someone, what's the additional dimension that it gives? So this was my normal walking route that I would walk through weekly. And weekly you would see children playing, you would see some people using the outdoor gym, some people just having picnics, some people walking. But as you can see, it's really quiet just because of COVID. All right. So this is the park named after Mandela in Leicester, and we can see a lot of signage that tells you this is Nelson Mandela Park. And this is the sign that we saw on the bus to tell us that here's a park named after Mandela. Also interesting that the transportation nodes at that park also has the same name. So how do you know you've arrived? You are arriving at Nelson Mandela Park. Please climb off to go whatever. So how transportation even plays into this space. So places named after Mandela, or any place named after someone or something, serve as narrative infrastructures. They connect our memory or their identity, the civic meaning, and the place. It makes a connection for us. The name creates symbolic value, but the meaning depends on public interpretation and the experience. So if you don't know who Nelson Mandela is, will you know the significance of this park being named after him? And we ask the question, so if you go to a place, what might you expect to learn from a place when visiting about that person? And you can either learn about their life history, you can learn about their significance, you can learn about their values. But there is an expectation. So if you think about any park or any place that you have ever visited named after someone, there is a specific expectation. So some sites communicate Mandela's legacy more clearly, while others not. Some do, some don't. Some is just a naming act, some give more. Named places reveal how our cities negotiate memory, belonging, and representation. And I think this is where the Urban Observatory part come in that I want to highlight. So it's not just, so think about your own town. After whom are your streets named? Or after what? What is the memory that's held in these spaces? All right. So this is just a tentative list of places named after Mandela in South Africa that Celeste and myself compiled. And here you can see Gauteng is quite a bit. So it's according to province, and it's not all of the places. So when we spoke to the Nelson Mandela Foundation, one of the things is they can't keep track of all of the places being named. It's difficult, but you should actually apply if you want to use the name as a naming act. But just to give you an idea of the scope of what we're talking about, not even to say about when we do this exercise for the UK, because there's many places, streets, parks, buildings and stuff named after Mandela in the UK. So if you now think about Leicester Park, here we have the community park in South Africa. It's also a community park, but it is in a township in South Africa, and there's only 2 signboards. The locals don't necessarily know it's called Nelson Mandela Park, even though Nelson Mandela opened this park himself in 1996. Really different to the Leicester Park, but it's still a community park. What is the beautiful thing about this park for me is if you have a look at the top, can you see the dirt roads where the children run up and down between all the play equipment? And in Mandela's speech, he said, this is his wish for the park. Not to be named after him, but to be a place filled with the laughter of children. So if you have a look at his speech, his opening speech, and this is so, is the park functional? Does it serve for what the intention was? But it doesn't tell anybody in the community why it is named and why that significance, that link isn't visible. Set against that park in Mamelodi, we have this abundance of graphic heritage elements commemorating Mandela in Sandton. So this is about 50 kilos further. So this is in Sandton. It's the richest square mile in South Africa, not South Africa, Africa. And here you can see it's completely tourist orientated. Loads of money going into these representations to tell the stories of the significance of Mandela, his values, what he did. Okay, but the question is, why does this matter? Why does all of this matter? So place names are not neutral labels. They shape how people remember, navigate, and value urban space. Naming gives symbolic meaning to ordinary streets, buildings, parks, and precincts. It connects public space to political, cultural, or historical narratives. And names can make memory visible, but they can also simplify or obscure complex histories. And then toponymy, the naming act, the naming of a place, becomes a design and heritage question where names shape public understanding. But this is the important point for me, is place naming is embedded in our city infrastructure. So this is an example of Nelson Mandela Bay. It is in the Eastern Cape. It's an entire municipality named after Nelson Mandela, and it's on your road signs. As you come in, you know you have arrived here. So that link to transportation again, or the naming act. Where are you going? You're going to Nelson Mandela University. I'm going to the tourism center of Nelson Mandela Bay. So we use the name, but is the association really clear about it? And Port Elizabeth, East London, both of those towns have now been renamed. But they had specific linkage to the UK. So the Named After Nelson project. So this is, just to remind you, the Named After Nelson project was the impact project. From our previous research, it focused on places named after Mandela in the Gauteng City-Region. Our case studies included a variety of things named after him. So we didn't just look at parks. We looked at a park, a square, a bridge, a theatre, the village, and what was the other one, Rob?
And the Nelson Mandela Foundation itself.
And the Nelson Mandela Foundation itself. And then later, the hospital came in. So we looked at a variety. It wasn't a comparison. Originally, the Leicester and the Mamelodi one was a comparison. But afterwards, we had a look at how it's differently. So each side carries the name differently. And I think that's really important. And what we also see, it also carries different between national and international contexts. So some sites are highly visible, while others are less legible as heritage spaces, like Sandton, really legible as a heritage space, whereas Mamelodi, which is equally important, is less visible. So the case studies show us that naming alone does not guarantee that the public actually understands why it was named. There is a QR code if you want to scan, just to go to the website of the Named After Nelson project. And on there is everything. So all of the photos we uploaded to a repository. We share it with the Nelson Mandela archive so that these photos and the work that we did is accessible to all. The panel designs of the exhibition can also be downloaded and reproduced. And the exhibition was designed to be able to travel. So it pulls out completely flat and then it moves. So it has moved from the foundation to the Children's Hospital to Swan University of Technology. Part of the need of the foundation was that the public actually knows that they have an archive. So we selected items from the archive and incorporated into that impact project, so that with QR codes, so that the public can actually access the archive and see, oh, but here's the entire archive. What else is there? And how interesting is it to help them to share more of the wonderful work that they are doing. This is just another picture of the exhibition. So it's 8 panels now, in total 7 place panels with the introduction panel that pulls out completely and it's movable. So it's going to move soon to its next location. We're still pondering where it's going, but most likely it will go back into Joburg to the Wits Art Museum. But we also, one of the wishes is for it to come home where it started. Can be reproduced, not to ship the entire thing, but to bring it home from where the project started. So just overview of where is Gauteng. So if you ever wondered, so South Africa is at the bottom and Gauteng is right there. It's the smallest province in South Africa, but the most densely populated. It's also the economic hub of South Africa. And in that region, it includes Johannesburg and Pretoria, which is like a major city region where two cities sort of overlap, almost like Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo. So what does graphic heritage reveals? So firstly, it includes signage, plaques, symbols, maps, images, and other visual cues. These elements may shape how Mandela's legacy is encountered. So how do people see it or perceive it, how it's portrayed? A strong visual interpretation might turn a named site into a meaningful public story. So if you think about Santon, you can learn so much about him. Whereas weak or absent interpretation can reduce the name to merely an act or a label. Graphic heritage reveals that there's a gap between commemoration and communication, and those two actually goes hand in hand. And this is where I see like the storytelling chair and those work, because it really fits into our project. So design can strengthen the connection between name, place, and public memory. So these are just a few different interpretations of Mandela. So this was a plate that they sell at the gift shop. This is Mandela's statue in Stanton. This is him reading his morning paper. He used to love reading his morning paper, and they really wanted to capture that aspect of who he is. And it's a statue at his old home, which is now a luxury 5-star hotel if you ever want to visit Johannesburg. This is, I think, in Cape Town at the V&A waterfront. This is a duplication or a smaller portrait of the Harvey capture site. This is the one at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. This is in Port Elizabeth, which is out Loughborough, at the Heritage Walk, Route 66 or Route 67. And that is at the Cape Town City Council. So just different ways of how people interpret. And there was even a study done about how is he represented in statues. Is he holding his hand up? Is he dancing? Because every element has a specific meaning. But does the public actually understand what that meaning is? And you will see he's often dressed in that well-known dress shirts that he loved to wear. So a graphic heritage perspective. So thank you, Rob, for redoing this diagram. I was wanting to use it yesterday evening as well. When we talk about designing for heritage, we talk about graphic heritage because we come from our own discipline of graphic design looking at this. It's about the interpretation, how it is presented, and then how it's represented. All three work together. And over time as well, things change. People's knowledge of things change. So for instance, in South Africa, we have a younger generation who is not aware of some of the work that Nelson Mandela did, or they are opposed to what he did. So the narrative is changing. So it's very different to the narrative that we experience in the UK, the narrative that's going on in South Africa, especially under our youth. So the stories in Gauteng street names. So now moving on to where this then now feeds into our cities and into urban observatories and the work around it. Okay, so part of my postdoc, they asked me it was actually part of the knowledge exchange project with the Town Observatory and GCRO. And part of that was we wanted to have an output, something public facing to tell the people about the knowledge exchange. And part of that knowledge exchange was the commissioning of a map of the Mainz, which I did. And I looked at almost 44,000 street names in the Gauteng province. I'm not a quantitative person at all. I don't know GIS, but I had to teach myself because that's my space now. So I'm very, very proud of this work. And it was just such an eye-opener about how our project about place naming and Mandela's narrative spaces now leads to a larger discussion of what do we commemorate in our cities? And this is just street names, but I mean, there's buildings, there's parks, there's so many other things, but this is just looking at streets. Okay. So it becomes an everyday archive of urban meaning. How often do you pass a street and you say, you put it into your GPS, or you say, it's that shop, my house is just like the third from the corner of that intersection. We use street names like in our everyday language to tell people where are places or to say, I'm going to go there. But it's actually a sort of living archive of what the city remembers. So it shifts attention from individually renamed streets to the broader semantic structure of Gauteng streets landscape. So we did some projects about street renaming, which was really high on the agenda. But it's more having a look now at what is our semantic categories of these street names. And street names are treated as more than navigational tools, without us actually giving it that much thought. They communicate memory, identity, geography, power, and belonging. And once I did the analysis, we classified it into four main semantic categories: people, geographical locations, fauna and flora, and other. The people category was the biggest category, making up 57% of the data set. And it positions Gauteng's street network as a distributed memorial landscape of the past and the present, and maybe the future. Let's see. So Nelson Mandela, so this is where the connection comes in, appears most frequently among the recurrent commemorative names. But others struggle leaders such as and not just struggle leaders, but followed by other leaders such as Steve Biko and Chris Hani and Oliver Tambo and Walter Sisulu. What we also saw in the data set is where the commemoration of people occurs. So in the darkest sections on this, these are 2 kilometer square aggregated cells, is in traditionally Black townships in the province. So where they use those struggle names to name their streets. We also see a predominance of male figures or male names within this current canon. And that suggests that commemorative street renaming continues to reflect historically gendered patterns. So still highlighting the need for some of the renaming agenda that is still ongoing. Naming then operates as a form of narrative infrastructure where public memory is embedded into ordinary routes, our addresses, and our everyday movement. If you have a look at that QR code, it will take you to the map of the Mainz that you can have a look at, and the research around that process. Just to share the other semantic categories for interest's sake, I think this was really interesting. Streets named after geographical locations: North Street, West Street, East Street, South Africa Street, London Street. We have all of these streets named after different places. In this specific dark section there, it's in Cosmo City in the northwest of Joburg. And that entire suburb is named after other African countries. All these streets. The street leading in is called South African Street, and then all the other streets are named after other African cities. So really interesting how people then use, so within a planning dimension and commemorative dimension. So it's not just people, but even places. And of course, there are loads of mention to the UK as well, because South Africa has such a strong colonial history with the UK. Fauna and flora, that was, if I didn't know what the name was and I looked at the origin, before I guess I would say it's either birds or fish. Sort of, and then it's normally either a bird or a fish. I didn't realize there's so many birds and so many fishes, fish names. That's it's like ridiculous. But you will see the high clusters, and often where the fauna and flora names was used, it was new residential areas that was developed, and they had like a specific identity in mind. So very close to where we live, we have a suburb that's entirely dedicated to dog names. Corgi, St. Bernard, Dalmatian Street, Alsatian Street, anything you want to think of, any dog. So it comes into this thing of, which is part of our theoretical underpinning of semiology, where the words and the picture isn't always the same thing. So I always say to my students, if you think about, if I say dog, most likely everybody will think about a different type of dog. I have a golden retriever. Sarah, what do you have?
I don't have anything. I babysit.
Okay. So if I say dog, a poodle.
Poodle appears in my head.
So it's something that we take, so similar to street names, it's something we take for granted. When we say, oh, it's fauna, or oh, it's flora, oh, it's a neighborhood named after fish. Everybody has a different perception of it. So this was really interesting. And then names after other, it was new numbers, numerical, and materials like Diamond Street, Gold Street, Emerald Street, colors, Blue Street, Green Street. Things that we often use that, okay, but this was just really interesting. And so just to see now, how does this work and the path forward? So I still have 2 years left of my fellowship with the GCRO, where we are developing the urban places as narrative spaces dimension of the work and how it fits into the urban observatory theme. So they have different research themes that they look at. They look at, and it's really linked, and many of it is linked to the SDG 11, to the SDG goals. So poverty, inequality, and social mobility. They have a big study that they run on the quality of life. And from the quality of life insights, it often feeds into the others. So if they see something that's interesting in their data set, they would start with a new research project exploring what that data is saying. Sustainability transitions, spatial transformation, social change. This is where my project currently sits, but it can as well sit in the history and futures. So it's sort of, it's sitting there, but it could feed anyway. Inclusive economic development, the governance of the region, data analytics, information and visualization, and histories and futures. Okay, so I want to end off by bringing this back home. Okay, so this is an old picture of the Nelson Mandela Park when it was still the Welford Road Recreation Ground. We originally thought it was a naming act, a random naming act within a unique land mix use. But what we realized yesterday when some of the community members attended our talk at the SDG 11 Hub was that it was an intentional naming act within a specific land use context, highlighting the importance. which highlights for us the importance of actually capturing people's stories, because that becomes history. And if it isn't recorded, nobody will know once they're not there anymore. So in Leicester, Mandela's legacy connects to solidarity, the anti-apartheid history of the city, of the town, but also civic recognition, where the people were the ones that actually initiated the renaming act of that park rather than the council. The comparison with Gauteng highlights how meaning changes across place and across people, because it's the people that need to do the interpretation of that name. And Mandela's name is both local and global urban heritage, because it's this website, A World Named After Mandela. And if you have a look at the Nelson Mandela archives, it's really everywhere in the world, which I think he is regarded, I don't know whether it's on the same level as Coca-Cola or underneath Coca-Cola, but as like one of the biggest brands in the world. And Mandela named places become platforms for reflecting on just and inclusive cities, which is part of the SDG-11 Hub, which is part of the agenda of the GCRO, and also part of the agenda of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. So this is just maybe a different space of the park, which is close to you, that you haven't ever seen. So on the left, we have residential buildings. On the right, we have a prison. Here we have the park. And at the top is Leicester Tigers Rugby Stadium sticking out. And what was told yesterday is that this naming act was deliberate, was intentional, because of the location of the prison and the rugby stadium, because the South African rugby team was boycotted during the 1980s when it was at its height. Really interesting. You always learn something new. And that's it from me. I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you to the Institute of Advanced Studies from Loughborough, thank you, Senior, and your lovely team. And also the University of Leicester, the AIS team. And I also want to thank Rob for hosting me again, as well as Sarah Scott. And here is the QR code to the GCRO's website, really interesting. Their quality of life data set is freely available to anybody that wants to use it. You just need to state why you are using it so that they can keep track of how it's used. And please follow me on LinkedIn if you're interested in my work, or if you just want to meet or just connect further, there's my email as well. Thank you.